Here we go. Anyways, we want to start by just introducing our writers to you, and I'm going to start with Diana Eden. And Diana is our amazing woman over 80 writer. She has been with me, actually, I think the longest in terms of ongoing writers. And I think you've probably written, Diana, somewhere almost 20 articles for us now over the past few years. Do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, my cat just said hello too. I'm in Las Vegas. And yes, it's warm here, but it's just like every summer. Anyway, I have written.
Whoops. Is it just me or did something happen?
No, she froze.
Oh, she's back. Okay.
Am I back?
Oh no, I need to do a prayer to the technology gods because I said something. Anyways, carry on.
Yes,
you're back.
Okay. So there's another article coming out very soon on the beautiful villages in France. And my next trip is to Venice. And it's very hard to find things about Venice that haven't been written before, but I'm going to do my best by exploring all the little neighborhood restaurants. Well, maybe not all of them. I only have a week, but
Nice.
that will be my next article for you all.
Wonderful. Sandra Finney in Nova Scotia. Oh, I think you might be muted, Sandra.
Sorry about that. And if you see me doing this, I'm swatting mosquitoes. It's very humid here, and we live on a river, and this is rare for us to have this mosquito problem. But anyway, we do. That's just the way it is today. So I'm in Nova Scotia, the southern part, southwest Nova Scotia. Been writing for about 23 years, doing some travel writing along with other kinds of writing, and I've been traveling solo. Most of my trips are solo. My husband and I do some travel. It's limited. Anyway, and that's about 30% of my travel writing, and the other is solo or with a girlfriend or my sister. And an article, and I love writing about people. For me, it's what's the story behind the story. And anyway, so for me, it's a people thing. For example, the last story I wrote for JourneyWoman about Labrador, and I was stuck. I was stranded in Labrador, and I think the title is Not Once But Twice. And it was all about people. I was 4 days, and the boat didn't show up, and it might have been stranded. I might have been stranded for a month. Anyway, so here we go. Yeah, just people and experiences and people and place, communities. Yeah, and this is so wonderful, Carolyn. It's amazing that you've gathered this motley crew of us together.
I know. It is amazing. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, let's go over to France and meet Layla.
Yes, Layla's also subject to the gods of technology. She couldn't find the unmute button.
Oh.
So yes, I am in France. I live in France because I am partly French, so that makes a bit of sense. I live in Eastern France. Everybody goes, oh, France, I love Paris. I am nowhere near Paris. I can only get myself to Paris about once every 6 months or so, and all of you probably go there more often than I do. I live near the Swiss border in the bucolic Bugey region with cows and mini tornadoes and floods. That was yesterday. Today we have sunshine. Yesterday I was digging the water out of my furnace room. So whoever doesn't believe in climate change, please come and talk to me. So I've been traveling solo since I was 15. So that is a whopping 55 years. You do the math, I'm not going to. And these days, mostly I write about France, although I have a blog called Women on the Road. And there I do a lot of international travel, but I just travel less internationally now. I will be going to Southeast Asia in September and October. I'm not quite sure where. So probably, Carolyn, you'll get something from one of those regions. And otherwise, my two loves are food and history, and mostly French history, but also food history. So both separate and together. I'm really a foodie through and through, but history gets me going too. And I'm a former journalist and a former diplomat. And these days I'm recycled into blogging and travel writing. Recently, I wrote a piece for JourneyWoman on traveling cheaply in Paris, or not traveling cheaply, but how to travel more cheaply, because there is no such thing as traveling cheaply in Paris. And that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to go to Africa now. Rupi, are you still with us? Rupi?
Yes,
maybe she.
I am. Sorry. Yeah, so I'm from Kenya, born and bred in Nairobi. It's the center of my universe. I started traveling solo in my 20s, partly because I'm claustrophobic and I needed to get out of the house, and also because at the time there was this misconception that safaris in Africa are for the rich people, mostly white. And I was like, no, anybody can get out of the house, catch a bus and go somewhere. And so my initial travels were on the local buses called matatus. They have the right to pick up anybody from anywhere along the road and drop them anywhere along the road. So it was the cheapest form of transport, and that was all I could afford. But then I got noticed by media, and got invited to write for the national newspaper on travel. And I thought it was going to last a few weeks, but more than 20 years on, I'm still doing that. And a few other things like editing a wildlife magazine for the Wildlife Clubs of Kenya, which is the national organization for the youth to get involved in wildlife. So yeah, my interest is really in ecotourism, wildlife, and just discovering spots off the tourist grid. But not only just that, safaris are seen as sexy, nice animals to shoot at with your cameras and nice lodges to visit. But it's also important to be aware of what goes on behind the scenes. And these are challenging times. I mean, national parks are great for animals. You go and see them, but these are also protected spaces. But what happens to these animals once they step out of the protected spaces? So thanks to Carolyn, I mean, you'll be reading some of the articles that I've posted about women in conservation in Kenya and Uganda and wherever I can find them in Africa. But they're doing amazing work, just trying to get the word out, how important it is for us to be aware of wildlife outside of protected areas and how we can help. So yeah, any questions pertaining to that? I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Rupi, that's wonderful. And Rupi just wrote, I think it's been published, an article about the raptor woman of Kenya, and you're going through all of the endangered species and finding all the women that are working to help protect and conserve all of these species in Kenya and other parts of Africa. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm going to skip to Dawn. We're going to hop back over to the US to Dawn Booker.
Hey there, I am Dawn Booker and I am based in Durham, North Carolina. And I came into travel a little interestingly. I traveled very much domestically with my family. Travel was very important to us as a family. We went on vacations every summer to the Jersey Shore. And so I grew up kind of believing that travel was not a luxury and that it was something that you did every year, no matter what. And so as I got older, we maintained that. My family did family vacations extensively, really up until my father got sick a couple years ago. And so in my mid-40s, I moved to Paris to get my master's degree in global communications. My background is in journalism. I have an undergraduate degree in journalism. And when I got home from Paris, many folks were inspired by the choice that I made. And while in Paris, I did a significant amount of solo travel. I traveled all through Europe. I had 2 fellowships to live in South Africa, so I did that. And began to realize that there was a certain level of peace, a certain level. For me, the trip starts the moment I pull into the airport. And so there's a part of the whole journey that really matters to me. But I also began to realize that many women of color, especially over 40, were not really the target of much travel conversation, either from a commerce perspective or through travel narratives. And neither are local and indigenous people. And so I'd written some papers in graduate school, looked at the commodification of tourism, and came into my business, which is Packlight Global, an experiential travel business for women of color over 40, where I encourage and inspire Black women to see the world and to do so fearlessly. And the fearlessly is more about information, education, understanding local culture, sustainable travel. And so through that, I was recruited to be the editor-in-chief of Detour, Best Stories in Black Travel. I was the launching and founding editor-in-chief. And it's distributed through the McClatchy network of papers. I stepped away because I wanted to get back to what really mattered to me. And so Carolyn and I met, I think initially when I was at the Travel Writers Conference in Columbia last year. Hello, I'm sorry. Oh, I thought someone was asking me something. And then we spoke together on a panel at Women's Travel Fest. And so I found that through Packlight, a lot of the women, especially the Black women who travel with me, they do so as solo travelers. You know, in Tanzania, I had 6 women. None of them knew one another. None of them brought a roommate. They all came in a solo way and wanted to experience Ngorongoro Crater and other just wonders of Zanzibar and Tanzania. And so for me, I shared with Carolyn the last time we spoke, it's important that I write about just like general interest with regard to traveling over 40, solo travel, and then also from the perspective of a woman of color. And the article that I'm writing now, and it's actually been, as I shared with Carolyn, much more difficult than I expected, is that my father passed about 7 or 8 weeks ago, and I had a trip of 12 women to go to Egypt the next day after his service. And so I went because I knew how proud he was of the work that I was doing. But Egypt was magical for me. It was an amazing experience. The hot air balloon ride made me feel so close. And so I tried to write the article while I was there. I've tried to write it since I've been home, but I've really connected to the fact that my father prioritized travel for us is really where my love for travel came from. And I didn't quite understand that until I started trying to write the article. So Carolyn, I will write it. It's just a lot more.
I'm not
it's
worried
taking
at
a
all.
lot more out of me than I expected, but I expect it to be a little bit about Egypt and the lovely company that we worked with in Egypt, but also about, you know, where that space for travel, you know, what it takes up in our hearts and our lives and our spirits. And so I hope to be able to do that story well.
Yeah,
right,
well,
you.
you know what I'm learning about travel writing is that the story comes when you're ready, and sometimes, especially with these really emotional times that we're in, it takes a little while, especially when you're talking about personal things. But thank you for sharing that, Dawn. So happy to have you. And yeah, Dawn and Diana and I were on a panel talking about women, kick-ass solo women over 50 in travel. So that's the panel that we were on together back in March. I'm going to go to another kick-ass solo traveler, Karen Gershowitz, who is in New York.
Hi there. I started traveling when I was 17. I left home and moved to Europe, went first to the Netherlands, to The Hague, which turned out to not be a great place for me. but I was not coming back. So I went to London and I ended up spending 3 years there, which was quite an eye-opening experience for me because at the time things were very, very cheap if you were a student. And I went all over Europe by myself. When I came back to the States to go finish my degrees, I was in the Midwest and I was desperate to get out. So I ended up going to Japan for a summer and learned that I could get around anywhere in the world with only speaking English, which was probably a terrible lesson for me, but it has served me well, actually, because I can pretty much communicate with anyone, anywhere, even if I don't share a language with them. And that was kind of the beginning of I have to travel. And I've been doing it very consistently. The longest I've ever not traveled was during COVID. Because typically, as Carolyn has discovered, I'm gone every month somewhere. And I like going to quirky places. I like going to places that, by this point in my life, I've been to all the major cities pretty much on the globe. I managed to get a job that sent me internationally to work. So, but it was always in big cities. And so now I look for the kind of strange, fun things that are off the beaten path. And lately I've been doing a lot of traveling in the US, going to places that people don't always go to. And to me, that's really fun. I just came back from Wisconsin. And let me tell you, I've been there a couple of times. Wisconsin has just the most incredible amount of things that no one ever goes to that are fabulous. So I think that's going to be my next article, is just going to all of the kind of weird and wacky places there.
You are proof that curiosity can lead us in all kinds of interesting places, and I'm amazed how you always find something new to discover, even when it's close to home. It's something we can all learn from, I think.
Yeah, well, that was what I did during the pandemic. It was like, I cannot stay home. I'm a native New Yorker, lived here or close to here for most of my life. And I said, I'm going to find the places that I've never been to. I'm going to be like a tourist in my own city. And I discovered astounding things just by really being curious and searching them out. So, and I do travel with others on occasion, but mostly I travel by myself.
And Karen has 2 books. One is
Oh, yeah.
called Travel Mania, and the other
Right.
is Wanderlust.
Yeah,
And
that one's coming out in
there are articles
October.
about both of them on our site, actually. And we did a webinar together a few weeks ago.
Right.
So,
Right.
so yeah, lots going on with you.
Oh, yeah. Been very busy lately.
Great. I'm going to head to Montreal to Sandra Phillips, who has been involved with JourneyWoman, Sandra, since the very beginning, I would think almost 25, 30 years ago, right? Like,
Yes. I was a friend of Evelyn Hannon, who started JourneyWoman as a hard copy newsletter that she would mail to you. So I've been there since the birth, and I'm absolutely delighted to see Carolyn Ray take it over and bring it to a whole other level that Evelyn couldn't have even thought of. My traveling started, I was 19 years old, and I lived in Europe for a year and used Frommer's Europe on $5 a day, which actually worked. And then I'm also a native New Yorker, Karen, but I got dragged up to Montreal for love and wound up having to start a whole new career here. You take a girl from New York City, you dump her somewhere else, she shops. So I became Montreal's smartest shopper, wrote a book, Smart Shopping Montreal. Since have written around 35 different books and guidebooks. So it started me on a whole other direction, and traveled all over the world. What I like about travel is learning how other people live to help me live better. For instance, going to China and finding out that they eat on small plates. So if you put your food just on a small plate, you're going to eat less food and just take more as you need it. So it has changed my life significantly. Travel led me into being a newspaper columnist, a radio person, a TV personality. So who would have ever thought that this art teacher from New York City was going to be on this panel. So it's never know, you never know where your life is going to make lefts and rights along the way, which is true for this and for travel around the world.
Thank you. And Sandra is heading up our Things She Loves newsletter, which we just issued one on Tuesday of this week, looking at road trips, which she's also written about extensively. And we welcome your ideas about other Things She Loves columns. We want to make these really kind of edgy and fun and cover everything that matters to us as women. So thank you, Sandra.
Welcome.
Now to Tanzila. I'm not sure what country you're in, actually. So if you're in Sweden or Pakistan or where you are, but
Thank you so much, Carolyn, and hello, assalamu alaikum to everybody. I am in Sweden, but I'm from Pakistan originally. I was born there, and my background is in activism. Basically, I was born with a disability, and Pakistan is a very interesting country. If you have a disability, you meet obstacles, but they teach you a lot, and they give you this particular lens that you can use for any project. And I come from a very orthodox agricultural family. So I did not have initial support to travel by myself. But I think there's this power in just attracting what you really want. I got opportunities to travel initially when I was very young because of my activism and disability. But my mother traveled with me as my chaperone. And that too was like a fantastic experience. Together, we went to 20 countries together. And my journey would actually begin from the embassy in my country. I have a green passport, and unfortunately, it requires me to get a visa every time I have to travel. But those entire experiences also taught me how the world sees Pakistanis and how we need to make our own space. And I learned from that. I learned to navigate different visas for my work. And then I also learned how to communicate with the airlines, with the hotels. And then I have to travel with Desi mom who has to panic over everything. So I also learned a lot of people skills on how to calm her down and have fun and get the job done. It's only until the last 5 years where I got full support from my family to travel solo, and I didn't look back. I picked up my bag, and let me show you something. So this is the bag that I travel with. It has my wheelchair charger and some of my essentials like my sunblock and one bottle, this one mostly. And then I started traveling everywhere. I got a lot of chances to travel as a public speaker, to talk about my work, about disability rights. But then I saw that traveling is more like taking ownership of the world. And I believe that the world is equally available to us all, whether we're on the wheelchair like myself or whether we're over 50. Whether we're a man or a woman or anyone, the world is equally ours. So why not, go to every corner? And I loved when one of my fellow speakers said that I want to go to places that are less touristy. I also want to do that, and I want to own them and maybe clean them or talk to people. And I'm also a hopeless romantic, and I'm also an activist, and I have the inability to separate the two. So when I write an article, I actually write it from the point of view of a character. For example, when I'm traveling, I was recently in Estonia, but I couldn't be myself there. I wasn't Tanzila. I was this mysterious character who's out there, who's looking for a story. And when I write, those stories come forth. And the only reason why I do that is because why not? Why not add that spice to life? We don't have to give ourselves permission to be happy, to feel something differently. And we also don't have to follow the mundane, the normal, the boring. We can always take charge with our own pens. And being part of this community, being welcomed by Carolyn, I can happily just, go down and say that I'm not the only one. I feel more, welcome, connected, normal. I feel that there's a community out there who feels the same. Hearing from all of you only encourages me to make the world more accessible through my day job, which is being an entrepreneur for accessibility. And the future that we're walking into, 68% of the worldwide population in 30 years are going to be over 50. So we have to make the world more accessible for each other and for more people as well. And this service is fun and impactful at the same time. And hopefully all of this will reflect in my writing for JourneyWoman. So thank you, Carolyn, and thank you everyone for the inspiration, for the love. I can't wait to read all about your journeys, everyone.
Thank you, Tanzila. And I want to mention you were also awarded the Amal Clooney Award for Women's Empowerment. Congratulations on that. That's a huge achievement.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I noticed that Christine Weinbrenner snuck in on this call. I thought she was traveling with her family, so I wasn't sure if she would show up, but Christine's the host of the Soul of Travel podcast that has become part of the JourneyWoman family. And I'm going to put her on the spot and ask her to say hello and tell us what she's doing as she travels with her 3 daughters around the world.
Hi. Yeah, I made it to Barcelona in time to join, so I'm happy to be here. As Carolyn mentioned, I am traveling with my 3 daughters for a year, and I think we've just hit about a month and a half in our experiences so far. So it's been fun. And yeah, I host Soul of Travel podcast, which I started during the pandemic. I started it 1 year after I had launched my own women's mindful adventure travel company. Had officially launched it in February of 2020. So come March 2020, I basically shut down my business, and my kind of response to that was to begin to hold conversations with people who had been and continue to create a positive impact in tourism. And that evolved into highlighting women's voices in tourism. And that's how Carolyn and I met. And we have a really shared passion for creating that space for conversation and for creating soulful conversations and connections that really educate us about travel, but about being women and being in community and how we can show up to create the changes that we want to see happen in the world. So happy to be here with all of you tonight.
Oh, perfect.
Today.
Maybe you can pop a link into the chat too, Christine, because we're looking for speakers, we're looking for sponsors, and maybe you all can help us with both of those women that could be profiled on Christine's podcast. I have to tell you guys, I'm getting a little emotional, like looking at you all. Really? Oh, sorry. I want to, before I start crying, it's such an honor. I want to ask our group of writers a few questions and have them take the spotlight away from me. Would anyone else like to moderate this while I take a moment?
Okay, yeah, I'll take
Okay,
over.
Sandra Phillips, here's the first question. What is one place you think every woman should go?
That one place, and I know you mentioned something else you're going to be talking about, is what one place after the pandemic. So it's going to be combined together. And I'm going to say the Yukon of Canada. And the answer is because if you ever imagine the Wild West in the US, where people just went out and they didn't know what they were going to get, and they didn't know how they were going to live, they didn't know anything, very different from the way we travel, and they had to survive. And that's what the Yukon still is today. It's people who have like sort of ran away from their other life and how to figure how do they live now. It is totally empty. So if you drive from the 2 major cities like Whitehorse to Dawson City, it's about a 6-hour drive on a beautiful 2 4-lane highway. And there's only 2 gas stations and 3 places to eat. And maybe you'll see 10 cars in all that time. And I'll just give you an example of one story that, you know, the kind of things that they have to live through, 1 or 2. One lady I met up in Whitehorse, she lives on the other side of the water. So she has to come across to work. So when the water is flowing, she comes across on the ferry. When the water's not flowing, she walks, it's ice, so you can go across the ice. But in the middle, there's ice flows and you cannot walk across. So she has to put this bamboo thing 12 feet long on her shoulders and balance with this bamboo thing to get onto each ice floe so she doesn't fall into the water. I didn't imagine anybody in this day and age is living like that. And you just have to learn how to survive. And one woman from Ireland decided she was going to take over an RV camp. And she had one night the heating unit, the generator blew up and she had a fire, and there's no fire department. There's no nothing. You just have to gather all the people and they got to throw water on it. And then she had to drive 3 or 5 hours the next day to get a generator. You live in such isolation that you depend on people around you, or you have to depend on yourself and become very resilient. So it's an area of the world where you really can lose yourself. And in the pandemic, people like to go somewhere now, which is less touristy, which is less city, and definitely interesting people, interesting times in the Yukon.
That's quite the recommendation. Anyone else want to share? I love this idea of less travel places that yeah, Karen, of course. I'm sure
Of
you have
course.
some ideas.
Yeah, well, during the pandemic and then now, I, especially now, because every flight I've been on recently, there has not been an empty seat. The world has come back to traveling and it's gotten crazy. And I have had friends be in large cities in the world only to say that the lines and the crowds are unmanageable. So my suggestion to everyone is stay in the US or Canada, if this is where you're from, but if you're not, wherever you are from, go to the small towns in the countryside. You will be astounded by how much there is to do that you've never even heard of. I recently wrote an article about going to Arkansas, and I wanted to go specifically to go see the Crystal Bridges Museum, which I think everyone should go see. It is one of the more astounding places I've been to, but the whole area had things and I kept discovering them. I just came back a day ago from Wisconsin. And again, I've been in Wisconsin a couple of times and explored. I am to like outsider art. And the Kohler Foundation, for whom I have great respect, has put in a ton of money into restoring all of these incredible environments that people built out in the middle of nowhere. That was their life's passion. And they're astounding. They're just amazing. And on the other side of the state where I was, I discovered that Eau Claire, Wisconsin, of all places, has more sculpture on the streets than anywhere else in the US. They took it on as a challenge. And every year they invite artists from all over the Midwest, and the stuff is fabulous, and it's everywhere you go. Who knew? There are just so many places like that scattered all over the country that if you do a little bit of exploration, and now that we've got AI, you can help it to do the exploration for you, you're going to find places that are not touristy, that people are not going to, that are amazingly fun. I can't get over how many places there are to go, that you don't have to go to the big places that are just jammed with people and very expensive. Places I was going to were, if I spent $100 on a hotel, I was really being extravagant. And, it's a whole different world out there. So that's my recommendation.
Also, you're supporting small businesses in the community, and your money's going right back into the community. That's important too. I saw Sandra Finney with her hand up.
Okay. Well, I just to follow what Karen has said, and I agree with you 100%, Karen. And for me, I have narrowed that down a little bit more. So, I would travel anywhere in Canada, and anyway, but I've narrowed it down to my own backyard, and I do go to provinces around. But I think I just want to let me see if I can condense this in 1 minute. 6 years ago, a travel writer, put out a challenge to get up close and personal with our own communities for 30 days. Now, I have written a lot about Yarmouth, about Southwest Nova Scotia, about the people, the lifestyle, business stories, travel stories, lifestyle stories. I thought I knew a lot about my own region. And so I said, oh yeah, okay, all right, I'll do that. I don't know what I can learn, but I'll do it. Oh my goodness. And Karen, this is probably what you've discovered. Over 30 days, we did something different, unusual. We blogged about it. She was in Toronto. That was her hometown. And I was in Yarmouth, and my region included Shelburne, Digby, Yarmouth, 100 kilometers, and hers was a greater city. Anyway, every day we wrote something. We did something, went somewhere, experienced something. And it was everything from church suppers to little concerts and community halls and strawberry festivals and swimming in the nude in an amazing place where locals go, but nobody else knows. Tourists don't know about it. And where you can get the best clam burger, and this guy's teaching axe throwing in my backyard, and on and on. It was extraordinary. And that actually evolved into a travel writing book. And that was all from my backyard. And so I still do that. And I think I could write a second book and not repeat myself again. Might take that on as my own challenge. Anyway, so backyard community, learn about your neighbors within 100 kilometer or 300 kilometer, or your province or your country. Anyway, that's it. Yeah,
Lovely.
that would
Lovely.
be my tip.
Layla.
Yeah, I mean, I like traveling in my backyard too, and I live in a very beautiful backyard. I'm in the heart of France, so what's there not to like? But for me, one of the key drivers of travel, and the thing that drove me to leave home and see the world when I was 15, is diversity. I wanted to learn about new cultures, new people, new histories. And I think, to me, the most eye-opening experiences of my life, and not just travel, just of my life, has been my time at the United Nations, when I worked with people from every possible nationality on earth. A year that I spent backpacking across Africa, which was probably as different from my culture as you could get. A visit to Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, with cultures that are so opposed in so many ways to the things that I'm familiar with, and learning how to communicate with people when you don't speak the language, learning how to eat the food when you don't like it, learning how to do things that feel completely counterintuitive, yet having to adapt because you are the guest in somebody's home or country, learning how to deal with people who will invade your space and who will behave in ways that in your culture would be completely unacceptable, which on the contrary are signs of hospitality and welcome in the countries you're in. So to me, that dimension, and much as I love my backyard and I do want to get to know it, I mean, I have a site dedicated to France. Of course, I want to get to know it, but I have to continue traveling internationally, because I feel that what I can learn from the people and the places around the world is far bigger than what I can learn in my backyard. So it's a bit of both for me. I just wanted to throw that in because to me, it's so essential.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. Dawn? And then Tanzila.
Oh, I was going to say, Tanzila, did you want to go first? No worries. And I just wanted to say really briefly, reverting back to what Karen said as well, I like the next door city. Like, so in the Netherlands, I was in Rotterdam. I love Rotterdam. In Morocco, I preferred Essaouira to Marrakesh. When I go to the south of France, I prefer Juan-le-Pin and Antibes. So sometimes the little place or the smaller place next door is absolutely a wonderful way to get a more to me, it's kind of pedestrian, but a way to actually experience a place. And then the second thing I would say is that some of the people you meet on the first time you visit a place, schedule a time to go back and to hang out with this person so that you get a real experience. I'm always frustrated by travel writing that talks about an entire culture, an entire country on a 3-day visit. So I think that, going back, I love South Africa. It is my favorite place, but it's because I have a sister friend there that I met on my first visit. And so I've been back 6 times, but the experiences that I've had with her and her family and her children and, connections to, even though she's a doctor, her connections to tribe and culture, all of these things have given me a full picture of her experience as a South African woman. And so I would encourage you, when you make these relationships, when you meet these people, to go back and to engage with them. And those are always my favorite places.
Beautiful. Thank you. Tanzila?
Thank you. Just a couple of quick thoughts. Number one, I went back to Pakistan after a couple of months in June, and I had particularly gone back to attend my cousin's wedding. And before I went back, I gave myself a little task that I'm going to look at my own country from the point of view of a traveler and not as someone who has lived there for 30 years of her life. And I was astonished to see that there's a lot that I overlooked, the beauty, the goods, and the bads in my own country. For the first time, I just saw my extended family as a group of people that if I meet as someone from Europe, how will I engage with them? I looked at the footpaths in my own country. I looked at the food from that point of view. And then I also spoke to some women over there who were over 50, who were in my family or who I knew professionally, about where would they like to travel. And none of them said anything about their own country. None of them said anything about Pakistan, although Pakistan is a big tourist destination for a lot of Westerners, for a lot of foreigners, because of the historical placement, because of the Mughal history, because of the language, because of the food. I mean, if you go to a local Indian restaurant, pretty much Pakistani food is similar, a bit more spicy. So it is a destination, but I realized that the reason why I could not experience it as a destination was because of my gender. And that is one barrier that many travelers who are especially women, they experience. And I only got to realize that once I had moved out from that space and looked at my own country from that point of view. And then when I spoke to women over there, I was surprised that they had reference points. Please note that they don't have social media. So their only reference points are probably some old books that were, that their family had subscribed to, some newspapers. And one of these women said something like that, I read a novel. It was written by a traveler, a male traveler who had gone to Turkey. And the way he wrote about Turkey, I would like to go to Turkey. And then someone said that, when I was in school, I read a poem about Lebanon, and I would like to go to Lebanon. They know nothing about Lebanon. They don't know the conflicts there. They don't know the language, there's nothing. But these reference points, and that really inspired me that why we want to travel to smaller or bigger cities. Sometimes it's not because of the touristy nature of that place, but because of these inspiring reference points that we've built in our own mind. And I would like to invite everyone to actually speak about those reference points as well, because as a travel writer, I'm intrigued to know what are your reference points when you're making a journey, when you're going to a village. I'll give you mine. I was very young and I saw Snow White, and Snow White is actually based in Germany. And when I went to Germany, I got a chance to go to those smaller towns and cities, and I became Snow White. So I just wanted to put that out. And there were a lot of conversations, but I'm sure we'll come back to it.
That's beautiful. I think that would be a really interesting article to investigate a little bit more for people. And while you're here, my next question, and I want to make sure we have a little time to take questions as well, but you are all obviously very talented travel writers and experienced travelers. And I look at JourneyWoman as not just a place where we inspire women to travel solo, but also we want to empower women, and we want to empower women with firsthand information and experiences, and also tackle some issues in travel that need to be talked about. So Tanzila, what do you think is the number one thing in travel we should be talking about right now? Because you're involved in a number of different projects, and I'd love to hear what's front of mind for you, and then we'll go around to the others.
I think at this stage, from my corporate point of view, I can tell you one thing for sure: the world is investing their time and energy in inclusion, but it has to go hand in hand. For example, they want ideas, they want case studies, it would only be possible if we become so active, we're traveling and we're talking about it and we're sharing this feedback with them constantly. I'll give you an example. I went to a hotel in Italy and I wrote to them that I want to get this room. And they said that you cannot have this room. You have to have this room, which is like twice the price because that is accessible. And I pointed out to them that if I was an able-bodied person, I could have afforded this. I could have made for this one. Why are you making me pay more for a lakh that is in your building? So I would call that difference the disability tax. And now it's up to us to use that over and over again. Even if you don't have a physical disability, but you have a need that the platform is not catering to. So Carolyn, just to answer your question, I think the feedback mechanism here has to be really strong, that we not just publish on JourneyWoman, but we take those articles, we send it to the right bodies, we link them, and we contribute to the conversation.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And you've been doing some amazing work through your channels, talking to airlines as well and helping airlines. I have a little giggle when I watch your videos, but I also don't, because that's not good either.
It's okay. But they're meant for giggling actually, and then they do their job as well. Carolyn is actually referring to these little sketches that I've started doing for my interaction with different airlines. And there's this one with Qatar Airways that offboard you if you're traveling without a companion. And the conversation is hilarious because that's the truth of it.
Yeah, but so a lot of them end with offboarded. Oh my goodness. And I'll say, Tanzila, one of the things I love about you and the way you travel is you are really traveling solo on your own. You are not traveling in a group. You don't have help. You are doing it like it's just you. And that's amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. But I would also like to put forth that I would like to travel in a group as well, because I would like to experience how a community would respond to a disabled companion, a person with them, and see how that dynamics work. So I look forward to doing that and then sharing the experience with everyone.
Yeah. And I see we have a couple tour operators on this call that may be interested in taking you up on that. So we'll see what happens there. Any other issues? I mean, I know what's front of mind for me right now, and it's sustainability. And this is why we're launching a small ships division tomorrow in our directory. This is why we don't write about large ships in our editorial. I'd love to know from our other writers, what do they think is an issue or something that we can provide feedback on as the most important travelers in the world as women?
I think really quickly, I think commodification of culture and our idea of authenticity and our request and requirement of Indigenous people to perform their identities for us. It really, as I travel globally, it really becomes more and more upsetting to watch this insatiable need for people to perform a almost pre-colonial identity for us to be able to think we've had an authentic experience in a country. So kind of expanding our idea of what this, I want to be a traveler and not a tourist. I want authentic experiences, what that actually means. And is there agency and equity for both people who engage in this tourism experience? If someone has to perform their identity for you to feel that you've had something authentic, then we need to challenge our ideas of authenticity, of equity. I love everything Tanzila says about equity. It's really, really important, because when I was in Egypt, I watched people, mainly Western people, just really not treat the Indigenous people very well. It was this high expectation of servant and not service. And so just what does that authentic experience look like? And how does equity look globally?
Beautiful. Karen?
Yeah, it's funny because when I saw the question, the first thing that popped into my head was this all about being a traveler and not a tourist. And I think a lot of people don't have a clue how to connect in a culture that's not their own. And so it becomes a very superficial trip. And I think there are some really easy ways to connect. that people have never thought about. You know, one of my tips for learning about a culture is I will go to a university, sit on the campus with a book in English propped up in front of me, and almost everybody wants to come over and practice English. And I've gotten into incredible conversations with people, you know, who've then invited me to go places and have meals with them. And that's so different from, you know, being in a bus and looking out the window or going to the major tourist sites. I think that's the way that you learn about the world's similarities and their complexities, and you really begin to connect with people and understand that, you know, looking at global politics is not the same thing as looking at global people. And I think there's a real need for tourists to become travelers and to learn how to do that, because if you haven't had experience, it's sometimes really daunting. And so that really came to mind for me, because I've told so many people and expressed this to a lot of people who truly don't have a clue about how do I get into a culture? What do I do? You know, how do I find the not the tourist places? You know, I don't speak the language. I'm going to get lost. Then what? And so that's something that I'd like to see really come out, so that people get a better sense of where they're going and who the people are. And I think that does lead to more equity and more understanding, just basic understanding, which I think is often missing.
Yeah. I want to run down to Christine again, because Christine interviews women all the time on her podcast. And Christine, what do you think, you know, from what you're hearing, what's kind of rising up in your conversations?
I think everybody's really already created a good summary of a lot of the things that have come up on the podcast. I think equity is really at the root of it, and sustainability, and being a more conscious and responsible traveler, and understanding who we are once we start moving about the world, and the impact that that has, positive or negative. And I think there's so many things that are important to talk about, but I think really thinking about equity and sustainability, and how to turn sustainability into action and bring it past marketing and greenwashing, and something that we can easily sell, and actually putting wheels in motion and creating impact with what we say we're trying to create in our businesses. So I think those are things that are really important to be talking about.
Thank you. I know we're coming to the close of this, and we didn't even get to really talk about solo travel. What we talked about on this call, which I think is just as important, as we talked about the values of travel and why it's important that we travel, and also why it's important how we travel with all of these things. So I think it's been really fascinating hearing from all of our editorial team. And again, I want to invite everyone on this call or that's watching us on Facebook to really spend some time on our website and read the articles that these women are writing, because they are for you. And all of them, you know, writing articles takes hours and hours and hours, never mind the travel itself, but it takes a long time. And so we really want your feedback, and we want your ideas. And if you have ideas, please do put them in the chat. But we're writing these articles, you know, to inspire you to travel, but also hopefully to you know, help you think about the way that we travel, because I think this is our responsibility as women. Going forward, we can't travel the same way we did before the pandemic. We have to have learned something from what the world has been through. And I believe that women are going to lead the way. So that's why this is so important for me to connect our writers and all of our readers together and have these discussions and keep the conversation open, because this is something we're all going to do together. Any closing thoughts from any of our editorial team?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I always have an Evelyn. Going back to our roots, and Dawn and someone else brought up about meeting the local and having a better experience. What she used to do was she would go into a local beauty parlor, get her hair cut or done or something. And when you go into a local beauty parlor, well, you're going to meet a whole bunch of women. You're going to chat the whole time you're there. You're going to make friends. They're going to invite you back for dinner. And it's the easiest way to find people in an area that you don't know about.
Lovely. Lovely. I want to share a little bit of news with you all since you're here with us today that I'm really excited about. But we are going to be launching next week a Women's Speakers Bureau, and many of the women on this call are on it. But this is an effort to improve equity, when it comes to conferences, but also just to get more women out speaking about solo travel in an inspiring way. And also, I think, as you've heard on this webinar today, a very thoughtful way about travel. So look for that next week. I'm so excited about this because we have some amazing women. And I want to mention one of them who's not on the call, but who has just joined our advisory council, and that's Tracy Breeden. And Tracy I met her a few years ago, but she was just most recently at our Women's Travel Wisdom Retreat last year. She's now joined our advisory council, and she'll be talking about women's safety. And she's got several articles already on our site. So we're really pulling together some incredible women, and please help us. Please ask people to subscribe to our newsletters, read our articles, join our groups. It's all for all of us to come together and make a difference in the world. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I'm at editor@JourneyWoman.com. If you have any other comments, ideas, suggestions on what you'd like us to write about, what topics you'd like us to cover, we are here to do that. So thank you, everybody. You can unmute if you'd like.
Thank you, Carolyn. This was amazing.
Thanks so much.
Carol.
It was great. It was great seeing
Thank you. That was fabulous. Cheers.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun. Let's do it again.
It's
all right.
empowering. Yeah.
I'm so psyched now. I'm not crying anymore. See, I'm all excited.
That's good.
Sandra, I love the beauty parlor. That was my favorite.
Yeah, that's great.
I get my hair braided. Whenever I go to Africa, I get my hair braided. And I didn't even think about the opportunities that I could have. So now I'm going to do that.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.